I love puzzle games. Some of the first video games I ever remember playing had some sort of puzzle element. I've been told by most of my family my whole life that I'm really smart, have a high IQ, and will be the first woman president, so I'm sure I have my love of puzzle games to thank for that. I love me a good mystery to solve, an unknown way of speaking, a hidden room, an ARG, and the feeling of learning, of finding, of aha moments. In the last 5 years, I've played a lot of games, especially ones with those elements, and this video is going to be about two of them. One, I have a lot of very strong and contradictory opinions on, and the other is the Talos principle. I think in another timeline, I made, or at least helped write, Joseph Anderson's video on The Witness, but I'm about 10 years, oh my god, too late to that in this timeline, so instead I'm gonna compare it to a game that didn't make me as angry. I first played the original Talos principle a while ago, but long after it was released. However, because I enjoyed my time with it so much, I pre-ordered the sequel when it was announced, and played through it rather quickly. This video has pretty much been on my mind since then. I haven't been able to forget The Witness, for better or for worse, and because of that, I haven't been able to forget the Talos principle either. So let me explain what I plan on doing in this video. My goal isn't to review these games, I more so just noticed that they are attempting to do somewhat similar things, and I definitely haven't been the first, whether they'd like to be compared or not. To make this more fun and interesting and YouTubey, I've created categories to pit these games up against each other, and will be giving them points out of 10, or 5 for my smaller, sillier categories. In my notes for this video, I have this category labeled as how seriously the game takes itself. And if I'm going by that logic, I'd say easily the crown goes to The Witness for constantly being up its own ass. However, as these games both try to be philosophical and big-brained, I think this category is better catered towards that. Now, both of these games aren't necessarily smart in the philosophical sense, but this is coming from someone who knows next to nothing about philosophy, so... They both tend to throw a lot of big ideas at you about humanity, about perspective, about God and religion, about what it means to be alive, and then just kinda go, okay, back to puzzles now, without going in too deep on what anything they're saying means. That's why you have to imagine philosophy in quotes everywhere throughout this video. I think it's a word that gets thrown around a lot, and I'm definitely not exempt from this criticism. However, the Talos principle touts itself as a first-person puzzle game in the tradition of philosophical science fiction, and The Witness tends to have a lot of audio logs of philosophers talking at you, so I don't really think I'm wrong in labeling these games as such. Speaking of The Witness having philosophers talk at you, that is seriously all this game has in terms of a story or anything other than puzzles. There's nothing really here for you to latch onto, just a lot of big ideas told to you with you unable to point out their inconsistencies or contradictions. In the Talos Principle's credit, however, its philosophy lies strongly in the characters Milton and Elohim. They are clearly supposed to represent God and the serpent, and throughout the game you frequently have conversations with Milton about what it means to be human and how to live in a world that is against you and your ideals. I think because you are able to at least, sort of, include your point of view in these conversations, and Milton and Elohim actually have connective tissue in a way, the Talos Principle fares much better in this category. The Witness feels like it almost haphazardly has the philosophical talk thrown in order to make it seem deeper than it really is. Yes, I know that it's supposed to be about changing your perspective or whatever, but personally I think most people could get that idea without all the random quotes that feel like a philosophy student's homework. The Witness gets a 3 out of 10, the Talos Principle gets a 7 out of 10. I gave the Talos Principle an extra point here because at least some of its philosophical ramblings are actually written by the people who made the game, not some old white dude who died in the 1700s. I'm gonna say it right now. The Talos Principle does not stand a single chance in this category. As many bad things as I have to say about The Witness, I will never speak ill of its creativity. For days, maybe even weeks after finishing the game, I was seeing dots and lines everywhere. It was like a disease, a worm in my brain, and I know I'm not the only player who has experienced this. Far from it. I heard the noises in the traffic outside my window, saw the lines of the trees, paid attention to reflections in water, and noticed just how many circles are in my life. I don't think I've ever had a game stick with me, at least visually, as much as this one has, and there's a part of me that's thankful, but another part of me that hates it. I do think that while it very clearly wins here, the creativity can get in the way of solvability. The Talos Principles may be slightly less creative, sure, but I think that they are more easily solved with the knowledge that you have. Banging my head against the wall many times throughout The Witness because I simply didn't have the required information I was to get elsewhere was frustrating, obviously. But I think what was more frustrating is when I actually did have the information and just didn't know it. Like the water dripping puzzle, certain puzzles in the desert area, or just all of the audio puzzles. They're creative, yes, but to a fault, I think. Granted, trying and failing when I don't have the prerequisites could just be because of the game's open world structure, compared to the Talos Principle's very clear and visual leveling. But I think sometimes the game just wants to throw a fastball to laugh at you. Does it still win? Yes. Do I like it? Tough to say. The Talos Principle gets a 6 out of 10. The Witness gets a whopping 9 out of 10. Docked a point because of the damn water dripping puzzle that I still do not understand the solution to. If it hasn't been clear yet, all categories, but especially this category, are really just my interpretation and can honestly be up to a coin flip or depend on how I'm feeling that day. The Witness tends to make me angrier, so I guess points for that, maybe? I know a lot of people compare the Talos Principle 1 and 2's puzzles when the sequel released, with a lot of people saying the first one is much harder, especially the DLC, which I hadn't played prior to making this video. Having played the base game again for this video, I can say that in the beginning areas, I did not struggle. The puzzles were actually relatively simple for me, even the quote-unquote harder difficulty ones. The DLC was significantly harder, but still mostly enjoyable. I haven't played the sequel in a while, so I can't speak on how they compare, but that's not what this video is about. Comparing the difficulty of The Witness to the Talos Principle 1, I do think that The Witness is harder, and I might be wrong in assuming, but I feel like most people would agree. Replaying both of these games, I gave myself the leniency of looking up the answer whenever I got bored or my head hurt too much, since I've already beaten both once. I will say that I more frequently was looking up the answer to the Witness puzzles. Does that necessarily mean they're more difficult? No, I do believe the Talos Principle is just more engaging for me, and I feel more satisfied beating a puzzle in it. However, I still believe that overall The Witness is harder, as even early game puzzles with moving parts that you've already learned about can be infinitely harder than some of the Talos Principles. I truly believe that I just have an easier time visualizing what the solutions are in the Talos Principle, whereas a lot of times in The Witness I don't even know where to start. Anyways, after all that rambling, should I give it more or less points if it's harder? Looks like more. 9 out of 10 to The Witness, 7 out of 10 to the Talos Principle. If you're wondering, I'd probably give Portal 2 a 5 out of 10 here, Cocoon a 3, Oberdin a 4, and Baba Is You a 7 as well, but I'm dumb, and that's just how my brain works. So those were the major categories I had for this video. Categories that I think each game can really hold its own weight, or ones where there maybe isn't a clear winner on first thought. The more serious categories. These following categories are just for funsies, and also for me to shit on The Witness some more, so instead of each one being out of 10 points, these will only be graded out of 5. As mentioned already a couple times before, The Witness doesn't really have a story. Not that it necessarily needs to, no game really does, but with how praised this game is online, it's tough going into it thinking it might have some deep hidden secret, and realizing it's pretty much just a mobile game that's nice to look at. Finishing hours and hours of mind-bending puzzles, some of which pushed me to my limits, only to have the game visually, and painfully, remove all of my hard work, one laser at a time, feels like it's spitting in my face. Even if you go for the quote-unquote true ending, which it is nice that it's right at the beginning of the game, I will say that, you're still left with a lot more questions than answers. You do have more answers, but none of them are very good ones. The story of the Talos principle, on the other hand, is very good. The mystery of who you are and why you're here definitely keeps you going through the tougher puzzles. I think The Witness also has a decent mystery to things, like the mountain and the statues, but I think the Talos principle just personally kept me interested for longer. Near the end of my first playthrough of The Witness, it was only my intrinsic motivation keeping me going. I remember streaming the challenge caves for a friend over Discord, and he asked me, "Why are you doing this?" as I continued to get angrier and angrier at myself for failing, and I just said, because I have to. There was no reason keeping me going, unlike the Talos principle where I actually did just want to finish because I wanted to see where the story would go. The characters are interesting, and the good ending feels like an actual reward. I read a review of the Talos principle about someone believing otherwise, that the free will ending is actually just the opposite of that, and that by breaking out of the simulation you're actually really alone now, and that feels less like a reward to them than it does to me. I understand this point of view, but if I'm basing this category on the entire stories and not just the endings, the Talos principle clearly comes out the winner here. 4 out of 5 to the Talos principle, 1 out of 5 to The Witness, since if I give it a 0 in this category, people will probably get mad at me. If you're not big in the video game scene, perhaps you haven't heard of this, but ludonarrative dissonance is when gameplay works against the themes of a story or certain plot points. Ludonarrative resonance is what I'd call the opposite of ludonarrative dissonance. I don't necessarily think either of these games are dissonant, as, again, The Witness doesn't even really have a narrative in the first place, but I do think there is still a desire, especially for me, for the game I'm playing to make sense in some way, through gameplay or otherwise. In the context of these games specifically, the Talos principle does a better job, because the difficulty of the puzzle works in conjunction with the themes of the story. You are playing as an AI the whole time, testing to become an android, to become human. The philosophical arguments with Milton help to prove your humanity. The good and bad endings of ignoring or following Elohim are supposed to be part of the test. Is there more to human consciousness than puzzle solving? Yeah, of course, but I don't know, it's a puzzle game. I can't expect it to have every facet of a human brain, which I guess makes it ludonarratively dissonant. I don't know, at least it's trying. The Witness, on the other hand, doesn't even attempt to do this. You're, doing a playtest for a game that involves circles and lines for some reason, and The creator is crazy, I guess. So you're like locked in this playtest forever? I really don't know. The game deleting all your progress when you finish is technically explained by the playtesting runs BS, but like, why are the puzzles difficult? Why do they increase in difficulty? Why does this world have no direction? None of this is ever explained, or maybe John Blow would just say I'm stupid, so therefore I would say it's not as ludonarratively resonant as the Talos principle. I'd give the Talos principle 3 out of 5 for this category. The Witness gets a 1. I think, like the puzzle creativity category, this one clearly goes to The Witness again. The Talos principle, just the original, is fine looking. It has a rather sad color palette that has aged just okay. The second game is a major improvement with its updated Unreal Engine and better color palette and locations. I haven't played the remaster, but if it looks anything like the second, I'm sure it's nice. Pretty even. The Witness, though, has a distinct visual style, gorgeous colors, and could easily be made into wallpapers if you're a masochist and want to look back fondly on this man-made horror. One of my favorite things about The Witness, other than the fact that I saw lines in my sleep, is the lake in the middle of the island. When I played for the first time, I walked past it many times, not giving it much thought. However, I like to pride myself on being a rather observant person, and when I noticed it had changed, I decided to take a closer look. When I really looked at it, and it clicked, I had the greatest aha moment I think one could ever have. If you haven't played the game, good for you, keep it that way. The lake is a direct reflection of your progress. Every single visual piece on this lake represents something. The leaves change color as you find hidden panels. The flowers help you locate the audio logs. The lanterns light up when you unlock a laser. The woman rises out of the water as you progress through the mountain. Not only does it function as a map, even before you unlock the boat, it updates with you, which I think is 5 out of 5 to The Witness here. Literally nothing I can take away points for. 3 out of 5 to the Talos principle. This category is easy and depressing. The Witness has no music. The Talos Principle soundtrack is just okay. This category is disappointing because I love soundtracks. I would say that The Witness has better sound design, as simplistic as it is. Like I mentioned before, the worms in my brain saw the circles and lines everywhere, yes, but I also heard that damn dun-dun sound in my sleep, I swear. And though I have mixed feelings on the forest sounds puzzles, and especially the water dripping puzzle, I can appreciate that sound was even given a puzzle in the first place. The Talos Principle has some interesting songs, but nothing really stands out. There aren't very many, and they're very repetitive. I do love the choirs and bells and such outside the puzzles, but most of the sounds do nothing to me. Except for the mines. They scare me every time. I hate them. The Witness gets a 3 out of 5, and I think I'll also give the Talos Principle a 3 out of 5 here. Sorry. This category is similar to the creativity and difficulty categories, but I really want to try and rate them differently compared to that. And honestly, I feel a lot of things in regards to this category. To be honest, I'm writing this script completely by myself, and even I'm not really sure how to describe this category. I really love how The Witness takes a simple concept, simple enough to even be a mobile game, and builds upon it in ways you don't expect. I love exploration and learning how a game speaks to me, and The Witness really succeeds at that. When you first start, most people will go straight to the first puzzle they see, but there's no way you're gonna understand that yet. And I love that throughout the game, you learn to. On the other hand, if I'm to rate this category based on the amount of moving parts in the puzzles, I'd probably say the Talos Principle does a better job. If anything, I feel more active in those puzzles, but that's probably just because I can move around while solving them, I guess. I don't necessarily think that's complexity per se, but I can't think of any other category it could possibly work in. This category really is just kind of difficulty and creativity again, hence why I've put it down here with the lesser categories, but I think if I'm to rate these games based on the vibe of this category, I'd give The Witness 4 out of 5 and the Talos Principle 3 out of 5. I don't really know how to explain it other than I feel like slightly more thought was put into The Witness's puzzles. They are the more creative ones after all. I could write a whole section on how Jonathan Blow is a very smart man who has done a lot for gaming and coding and pad my runtime even more because I have a big ego and like to make long videos, but I don't feel like listening to this man talk or learning anything about computer science, so I won't. 5 out of 5 to the Talos Principle and 0 out of 5 to The Witness unless Crow Team are also full of Trump supporters, in which case 0 out of 5 to both and 5 out of 5 to Mobius Digital. If these categories weren't clearly a joke yet, this one makes it obvious, I think. The Talos Principle 2 was pretty good. I enjoyed my time with it. However, I do think some of the puzzles were a little too easy, but I did appreciate the philosophy coming back, this time in actual characters rather than one-note computers attempting to be human. If I were to give The Witness a fighting chance in this category, I could bring up The Looker, though it is a parody and not made by Jonathan Blow, obviously. If there is ever an actual sequel to The Witness, please just kill me. This category isn't getting any points because I've given the Talos Principle enough free points as is. So that's all the categories I had, so let's tally up those scores and see who comes out on top. Out of a possible 60 points, we have The Witness with 35 and the Talos Principle with 41. I had a hunch going into this that the Talos Principle would win, but I am a little surprised that they only won because of the free points I gave them for not being misogynists. Go play the Talos Principle if you haven't and enjoy a good thinker, and seriously, jokes aside, you should play The Witness if it sounds interesting at all. Don't buy it at full price, and maybe don't even buy it at all if you can help it. But you should play it. It doesn't have much going for it, but it is maybe one of the best puzzle games I have ever played. I hope that by finally making this video I can maybe stop thinking about it, but I did have to play through it again in order to make this, so it might be a while. Maybe I'll pick it up again 3 years from now as a different person once again. Maybe I'll get less angry, maybe it'll finally click. I don't know, games are weird, man.
To the game, you just walk around jumping on shit.
Yeah. They're not seeing the most important thing.
This shit's stupid as hell, man.
Also, no, I will not be playing his new game. That shit really looks like a mobile game. Sorry, Jeff.